I'll never forget it to this day. He had his left hand on the steering wheel, reaching down between the driver's seat, staring me right in the face. Just staring me dead in the face. He pulls up like this. So you got to realize something. They say that cops are close-knit people, and thin blue line, all that stuff. When you're involved in a critical incident like that, a cop will come up to you and say, I know what you're going through. You got no fucking clue what I'm going through. Unless you've been through that, you have no clue what we're going through. That's why when I ran into Kevin at group therapy, that's what helped me the most. And I'll get to my story in a minute, but that's what helped me the most, because this group therapy is all cops that have been in critical incidents, whether it be in shootings or...
Yeah, I mean, we had a couple of them that... It's basically close to death. And so we get diagnosed with PTS, and everybody will call it PTSD, but we've since learned to drop the D because it's not a disorder. It's a brain injury. And PTS, my definition of PTS is knowing you're about to die and then not dying and having to live with it afterwards. And that's what everybody in this group goes through. By the way, you have a bunch of cops in a room who've been through critical incidents. Some of the humor that goes back and forth. If anybody ever got a hold of those text messages, I'd be coming to you and say, "Hey Matt, what do I do? I'm going to jail.
Right.
What do I do?
What do I pack?
Yeah, what do I pack? Tell me, do I got to tape my asshole shut or something? That's my main concern." But Mike, him and I just clicked when that happened, because I knew what he was going through because I had been there from a place of understanding. And my job now, and with Mike, my mission now is to identify those problems and go with it and help people go through it. Because if I don't, it's really a wasted opportunity.
There is help out there for people that are involved in shootings. Like Kevin said, Cop to Cop. It's a great organization that helps people that are having mental health issues. But nothing's better than getting together with another cop that has done the same thing that you have. You could sit there in front of a therapist and tell this therapist all day,
and they have no clue.
He's got no clue what's going on.
I had a therapist, one of who we talk about him quite often. He told me, he goes, "Hey, you were a cop. Didn't you expect to get shot at?" Well, no. The statistic is like less than 0.05% of cops in the country get shot at. 0.01 get actually shot, and less than that even get killed. But it's still tragic when it happens. But Mike's shooting in Lyndhurst, that was a little different than mine. It was a little different than mine.
It was September 16th, 2014. It was just after midnight, a little after 2 o'clock in the morning. Again, like Kevin said, it's a slow night. It's Monday night into Tuesday morning. Monday Night Football was over, so the crowds, the bars were pretty much emptied out. And now there's really not much to do. Lyndhurst doesn't have any highways in it. I mean, we're surrounded by highways, but we don't have any highways that run through it. So it's pretty quiet time. It's when we catch up on our reports and, just catch up with the guys and, see how their weekend was and whatnot. So a little after 2 o'clock, one of our neighboring towns puts out what they call a bolo, be on the lookout. They said that two males were trying to break into a car in the town, one town south of us. The owner of the house had cameras on the house, and why she saw the camera at 2 o'clock in the morning, I have no idea. But she sees these two guys trying to break into her car. She comes running outside. She scares them away. They jump in a black SUV. They take off. They give us a description of the black SUV. One of our guys sees it, tries to pull it over. Guy takes off on him, leaves him on a chase through town. Our guy winds up losing it, losing a vehicle. He broke off the chase.
Now, while he's in this chase, you want to talk about adrenaline? Your adrenaline is going 1,000,000 miles an hour. And you go through enough of these different chases that this is not going to end good. Either he's going to get away or it's going to be really bad when it ends.
All right.
And then a lot of details started coming out. The vehicle was carjacked earlier in the night at gunpoint from Newark, which is...
As you're pursuing it, that's what you're now learning that...
One of the guys got the plate. I'll never forget. It was Hotel Yankee 8170. Guy got the plate, and once they got the plate, they start running it and everything else, and then they figured out it was carjacked. Like I said, at gunpoint, they were trying to break into cars. After our guy breaks off the pursuit, the guy doesn't know his way around town because he could have hit one of the local highways and he would have been long gone. But the guy wound up staying into town. One of our guys sees the car again, goes to pull him over. So he's chasing him through some side streets and he hits the one main road in our town. And they were traveling northbound. Right now it's 2:25 in the morning. Nobody on the road on a Monday night into early Tuesday morning. They're doing probably 90 miles an hour. Generally, if it's like during the day, we would have called off that pursuit because it's too dangerous to the public. But there was nobody there, so we kept the pursuit going. They're coming southbound. Like I said, nobody else on the road. I see my guys' overhead lights, chasing a guy, and I'm looking down at the road. Now, I turn onto the street, and I'm coming southbound. I'm coming towards the pursuit. I'm watching my guys' overhead lights so I could kind of gauge the distance to see how far they were. Because what happened is the black SUV, the guy turned out his headlights. I was waiting for him to dip down one of the side streets. I didn't see any headlights. I got fixated on my guys' overhead lights. So I see they're getting closer and closer, and he's giving updates, and I'm just staring at his overhead lights. All of a sudden, I look back down at the road. The SUV is in my lane of travel doing 90 miles an hour coming at me head on. If he hit me, I would have been gone. I would have been long gone. I had just turned onto the street, so I'm not even doing 15, 20 miles an hour. I was just casually, strolling up just to see, to get a look at everything. He comes at me at 90 miles an hour. I turn out of the way. He turns out of the way. He missed me by about 5 feet. He was going so fast, he lost control of the car. The car was swerving. How he kept control of the car, I have no idea. He winds up hitting, there was a construction site there. He hits a construction sand, one of those big yellow sand barrels. He hits the sand barrel, the car turns sideways. Another car came in, pulled in right behind him. Driver puts the car in reverse, starts ramming a police car. Now the tires are spinning. Roads start filling up with smoke. So we come up onto the passenger. When he hit, the car turned, sideways. We came up on a pursuit, come up right to the passenger side of the window. Draw down on the guy, show me your hands, show me your hands, show me your hands. He had his left, now again, the tires are spinning. We're getting, the whole left side of my body was filled with burned rubber, what I call road shrapnel, like the road was breaking up. I was getting, broken up concrete all up my body and everything. I actually had burn marks on my face from the burnt rubber. We pull up on the passenger side, start yelling to him, show me your hands. I'll never forget it to this day. He had his left hand on the steering wheel, reaching down between the driver's seat, staring me right in the face. Just staring me dead in the face. He pulls up like this. We went up shooting him. I saw a bullet go right in the guy's forehead from right across the car. And then his body just slumped down. His foot pressed onto the gas, his whole body weight went onto the gas pedal. At that point, the tire started really spinning. I figured at one point I remember seeing a key in the ignition. So I'm thinking we have to shut this car off at some point. So now at this point, the tire was spinning so much the tire blew out. The passenger side rear tire blew out. So now it's the rim on the ground. Tire spinning, or the rim is spinning. Now I'm getting just nothing but metal sparks into my face. So I take out my baton. I'm shielding my eyes. I break the window out. We call it break and rake. You break the window and you rake it out to get all the glass out. I go to reach in to shut the car off. Passenger popped up right in my face. I had no clue there was even a passenger in the car.
So my definition of PTS, what I said earlier, it's knowing you're going to die and not dying and having to live with it. At that moment, and I've spoken to Mike in depth about this, what I believe is that is his onset to PTS. Because if that passenger had anything, had a knife, had a gum wrapper, he's gone.
He said he could have kissed me. He was that close to me.
Yeah, he's gone.
What happened was, it came out later, but they made a pact to do anything they had to do to get away. The passenger knew the driver had a gun on him. So when we came up on the passenger side, passenger just reclined the seat and he laid back. So we actually fired right over him. Never even knew he was there. So he pops up in my face. I draw down on him. Show me your hands, motherfucker. You're going to get the same thing he got. So he just very compliant. Put his hands up. I had a guy come. We carry ballistic shields in our car. Now at this point, cops were coming from everywhere. So there must have been like 10 cop cars around. 2 o'clock in the morning, we're the only game in town. So
right.
all the other towns are they're filling the area with it because everybody wants to try to get involved in something at that point.
Which is crazy because they really don't understand what getting involved in this means.
Yeah.
Not only mentally, but now you're going to have to go through the court systems because cops, we're open to indictment just like everybody else. Yes, we have to follow Attorney General guidelines on use of force policies, but if we do something wrong, guess what? We're going to jail.
Right.
Plus now you get a log of all the cops that came there. You usually get the junior guy and he gets out the pen and pad and he's got a log every cop, what time they got there and everything else. So you're actually documented to being at that scene, whether you did something or not. So like I said, we carry ballistic shields in our car. One of the cars came up. I told him to grab the ballistic shield, hold down on the passenger. I wound up reaching in with my baton and I actually got my baton into the key loop, the key ring of the keys. And I wound up shutting the car off. Now, at that point, like I said, a lot of it I remember clearly, but I don't remember the timeline of it. I take my baton out again to get the passenger out. The wheels are still spinning at this point. I'm shielding my eyes, so I hadn't shut the car off before we got the passenger out. The wheels spinning. Sparks are coming up in my face. I take my baton. I go to open the door. The door handle flies off. It's like, what else could go wrong at this point?
Anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
So now, draw back down on the guy, show me your hands. The cops came up. They had to drag him out of the passenger side window. He got out without a scratch on him. That's when I reached in and actually shut the car off. So now
the funny thing is about the passenger is the passenger gets out and gets out of custody or something. At this time, Mike is in group therapy, so I know I'm in contact with him. The passenger ends up getting shot in, where was it, Newark?
Newark.
He gets shot in Newark. And we all we're sitting around in group therapy.
And I think it came out like the morning that we had group therapy.
Right, it was, because we were all sitting looking at Mike's side. I'm like, where the hell were you last night? Did you sort of take care of business?
So what happened was they were both gang members.
Yeah.
When we got the passenger out, he went to the state police took custody of him and took him down to one of their barracks and interviewed him. And he gave up the whole story. We carjacked the car in Newark. We were trying to break into a car. Some lady came out of the house. We took off. The cop led us on a pursuit. He goes, we made a pact that day to do anything we could do to get out of there. He goes, I knew he had a stolen gun in the car. He said, I knew there was going to be a firefight, so I put down the seat. Told the whole story. Ratted out his friend, everything else. He goes into jail. As soon as he got to jail, he changed his story, of course. He told everybody in jail that the driver got knocked out from the accident. We went over to the driver's side. We opened up the door. We started beating him up. Then we shut the door. We ran around to the passenger side and shot him. So that's the story his family's getting.
Right.
So, totally untrue. But he went to jail, told his whole story. He wound up bailing out of jail. When he got back into Newark, they found out that he ratted out his friend. He was walking down the street one day. A guy just walked right up to him, put a bullet right in his forehead, killed him right there.
Right. Another gang member.
Yeah.
Protecting each other. But you got to understand something. Mike took somebody's life. And you see movies and stuff, and everybody, they shoot them, and it's no big deal, or they
go right back to work.
They go right back to work. It's not like that. You took somebody's life. Unless you're a cold-hearted killer or a sociopath or a psychopath, that's going to affect you in some way. And people don't understand. Just because we're cops doesn't mean they dehumanize everybody. They dehumanize prisoners. Okay, you were in jail, so all of a sudden you're a piece of shit when you get out. But that's not true. You have a mother, you have a father, you have people in your life that love you. You have kids or whatever it may be. You're still a human being. You still have human feelings.
I always say that. That's one of the things that pains me to today is I always wanted to meet his family. Listen, I know he's got a mother that loves him. I know he's got a grandmother that loves him. I know he's got a sister that loves him because they were all over the media. They were in the paper every day saying, how could they do this to my son, my grandson, my brother? He didn't deserve this. He wasn't such a bad guy. Meanwhile, he was 23 years old, just did 3 years in state prison for the same thing. But he was a good guy. It was 2:27 in the morning. He was just out with his friends. You know,
But being
in
a
a
father,
stolen vehicle.
yeah, but you know, and that's what they said too. A stolen vehicle doesn't relate to a death sentence. But they don't understand the whole story.
Right.
You know, they didn't see it the way I see it. They're only getting the media story of it. And of course the media is going to portray the cops to look like bad guys every time.
Right.
You know, one of the articles that came out in the paper, I'll never forget, I have a picture of it on my phone. It says, what we do know is police chased a vehicle and shot the suspect. What we don't know is why the cops shot at a guy who was in a car that was surrounded and there was no escape route. There was an escape. The escape route was going to be right over me. It was either him or me that night. But again, the family never heard that side of the story or doesn't want to believe it. And that pains me to today.
we all gravitate towards the stories that we want to hear. You know, it depends on history is written from perspective of the victors. You know, I'm sure people in Nazi Germany had very good reasons for doing what they were doing in their mind.
Right.
You know, just like his parents. And another thing is we're both parents. I'm not sure if you're a parent or not, but I'd do anything for my kids. And I'm always going to believe my kids to some extent. You know, I'm always going to have their back. So
I don't think I ever heard a parent say, yeah, my son's a real scumbag.
No,
You know, they're always going to fight for it.
And Mike and I have spoken about this. To look at it from a parent's perspective, it's not that you say what they're doing is right, but you understand it. You understand the pain that they're going through. They just lost a kid, and that's a hard thing to deal with. But
like Kevin was saying, you know, when you see these TV dramas about police and everything, they're involved in shootings and, you know, even movies and all that. They're shooting at this one and then they jump in a car and they shoot. It's not like that.
No.
There is, when I tell you, I was so numb after the shooting. Like I said, I just put a bullet in a guy's head from 4 feet away. You know, Kevin said, unless you're some psycho, you know, a bloodthirsty killer or something, it's going to affect you. You know, and now you start thinking about everything. You start thinking about, am I going to be able to work again? You know, was I justified in doing this? What are my kids going to think? What's my wife going to think? I was married back then. What's my wife going to think? What's my chief going to think? All of that's going through your mind. Now you have the whole aftermath of it. Like I said, police cars came from everywhere. There had to be 30 police cars there. A New Jersey state trooper wound up getting into pursuit, and he wound up firing that night. And where my town is, it's situated right between the New Jersey Turnpike and the Garden State Parkway. Both of them run pretty much the length of the state. And there's a highway at the end of my town, which is in the town next to us, that could hit both of those highways.
now mind you, Mike lived in the town he worked in, so
Right.
it's a big deal.
And my kids were going to school there.
Right. So everybody knows. It's not like he's working 4 or 5 towns over. Everybody knows what's going on. They know there was a shooting last night.
So now Jersey State Trooper was involved. The troopers, they're on the Turnpike and the Parkway. They hear one of their guys are involved. They all come up. There had to be 50 trooper cars there. Cars from every surrounding town there.
But that bit you in the ass, though.
Yeah.
Because whenever the state troop, so when there's a policeman back then, I mean, you're talking about
It's different now.
2015?
2014.
2014. So back then, any shooting went to the Attorney General's office of that county or
the
prosecutor's office of that county. When there's state troopers involved, it goes to the Attorney General's. And the bigger government you get, the slower the process.
Right.
Like my process was pretty quick when they're going through grand jury and all that stuff, because every shooting goes to grand jury. But when troopers are involved and the AG's involved, now all of a sudden it just all slows down. And Mike just said, he's fallen under the disguise of, hey, I might go to prison for this. Even
Right.
though
I was
you,
going to say, does it become more political at that point?
yeah,
As it
because
goes further up the chain.
because there's optics involved. You
Right.
just had a guy, a young black man, who got shot by police. Think about the optics. Think about if that happened today. Mike would have been screwed.
Well, you know what it was? It was right after, if you remember the Eric Garner chokehold situation?
Yep.
It was right after that, where Black Lives Matter just started coming to the forefront, I guess you could say.
Right.
You know, now, and listen, I say all the time, I don't care if that guy was green. You know, what he was doing was wrong. It was either me or him. I don't care who he was. I didn't even realize, you know, You're not thinking at that point, oh, he's black. He must be doing something wrong. Or, what he was doing was wrong. I don't care what color you are.
Right.
But it just so happened he was a black guy. And like I said, the racial tensions at that point were just starting to really get bad. So we were waiting for, and that's the other thing, we were waiting for repercussions from that.
Because gang members are going to protect the other gang members. So it's not uncommon. We saw this in numerous towns throughout New Jersey, that you kill a gang member, all of a sudden the gang members put out a hit on the cop. Now, there was a shooting in Jersey City. A guy named Melvin Santiago was killed by a gang member. He was executed. He was at a CVS or Walgreens or something. Guy came up, shot him right in the car. They found the guy who did it, the cops, and they got into a gunfight with him. They ended up killing the guy. So now the guy was a Blood, I believe. He was a Blood gang member. So now the Bloods put a hit out on the Jersey City cops, all of them, to the point where the Crips, because they're rival gangs, the Crips they actually spoke up and said, "Don't worry, police, we got your back." So now you're getting protected by the Crips because it's a political gang war.
Right.
It's crazy. That's crazy stuff. But Mike had a murder indictment hanging over his head for what, 15 months?
Yeah. See, that's the other thing that people don't understand. You think that, once you're involved in a shooting, they give you off the rest of the night, you go back to work.
Right.
That happened at 2 o'clock on 2 o'clock in the morning, September 16th. September 17th, we had to go meet with our attorneys.
Every shooting, you have to get an attorney.
You have to get an attorney, or you're going to go to jail, because there's going to be lawsuits and everything else. September 18th, I went to the state police and gave my statement to the state police, all about the shooting, what happened, and everything else. Again, that was September 18th, 2014. Everybody kept saying, did a great job. You did what you're supposed to do. You did what you're trained to do. I was on a SWAT team. I'm a submachine gun operator on a SWAT team. I was very qualified at what I did. And everybody kept saying, perfect. Picture perfect shoot. You did nothing wrong, but we have to present it to grand jury. All right, when's grand jury going to be like next month? They said, well, it could take up to a year. So now, when it goes to the Attorney General's office, they have to go through it. There were 4 officers that wound up shooting that night. So they have to get all the evidence. They have to get your
the ballistic. All the ballistics need to be checked. Who actually
your
fired
casings
the kill
off
shot.
the ground, and then they take your gun, and then they fire to see who. They compare the
striations and the bullets.
Striations and the bullets and everything. So it takes a while. It took 53 weeks to the day. September 16th, 2014, we got cleared by the grand jury. September 23rd, 2015. In that 53 weeks, 1 year and 1 week, I didn't hear from the Attorney General's office one time. They don't call to tell you what's going on with the investigation. They don't call for any, additional questions or anything like that. You hear nothing.
Meanwhile, he's going through these legal problems, and think about this from a stress perspective. You're going through all these different legal problems, and he's starting to show some really unhealthy behavior coming at him. And so he had my stress plus one. So getting involved in a critical incident, feeling all the feelings that you're feeling, and then having to worry about going to jail, it was rough. It was really rough.
I was sleeping usually about 2 or 3 hours at a clip. I'd lay in bed at 9 o'clock just so I could know I could get 3 hours sleep, wake up at 12 o'clock. I was sleeping in my basement. Real bad nightmares.
You don't want to affect your family.
Waking up in a cold sweat, not knowing if I pissed myself. That's how sweaty I was. The bed was soaked. So I just figured I'd lay down on the couch down in the basement. I got a TV in there, bathroom, refrigerator, finished basement. So I'd lay down at 9 o'clock, wake up at 12 o'clock. Now you're wide awake because your mind's spinning. Go to the refrigerator, have a beer, lay back down, fall back to sleep at 1 o'clock, sleep till maybe 2, 3 o'clock, go back to the refrigerator, have another beer. Then I'd be getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then I'm up for the day,
Are you able to work this whole time? Or are you still working?
I was out on workers' comp.
For 15 months?
No,
52, 53.
50, a year and a week.
But you actually were, because it took you beyond that to get retired.
Yeah.
So
I actually had to start using my own time after
right.
that.
So workers' comp will only cover you for X amount of time.
52
right?
weeks.
Right, 52
1
weeks.
year.
So after that, you have to start burning. So there's a likelihood, and there's many officers who do it, that get involved in these incidents where they can't go back to work. It's not that they don't want to, they can't. Like, I'd give my pension back tomorrow. I was able to retire with a pension. I'd give my pension back tomorrow to go be a cop again, because I loved that job. It was a life of service. And it wasn't the bad guys. It wasn't catching bad guys. It was helping little kids. I can tell you a dozen calls where I left that call saying, you know what, I made an impact. But when you can't go back to work and all of a sudden you're going through legal issues and the doctors are telling you can't go back, now your time runs out. There's a likelihood, and I know a lot of officers who go without pay. You got a family, you got a mortgage, you got all these different responsibilities. How are you going to pay? How are you going to pay for everything? So there's that added stress that goes on to it.
Well, after the grand jury, after what they call no build, which means, they're not charging you, still took another 6 months to get the pension, to go before the pension board. Because at that point, I decided I was going to retire. So, I'm not, I couldn't picture what I went through in that year. I couldn't picture ever going through that again. And I told my chief right after the shooting, and my chief was great with me. I said, Chief, I'm not going back to work until grand jury. I said, now, first of all, I was involved in the first fatal police shooting in Lyndhurst history. Never happened before. Nobody really knew what to do, and it's no fault of their own. Like I said, my chief was the best. He was there. Anything I needed, he was right there.
But he'd never been through it.
They've never been through it. Now, the state trooper that fired, right after the incident, there was cops all over the place. Me and another guy from my department are just standing there saying, like, holy shit, what just happened? When you're going through that, you don't think of
Nothing.
The severity of the circumstances. You pretty much go into react mode.
Yeah, you're trying to
almost
make it to the next minute.
But after it, when everything starts to hit you, you start to decompress a little bit. We were just standing around going like, what the fuck? Like, now what do we do? State police were there, and believe me, they've had a ton of shootings in their career. They came up with a team of guys. Their trooper there that was fired, that wanted firing that night. They got a circle around this guy, and you just see the whole circle walk out of the scene. Gone. Never saw the guy again. Never saw the guy again for a couple of weeks, and then we actually become good friends after that. But nobody from Lyndhurst knew what to do. So I told my chief, I'm not going back to work until grand jury's over. I can't go back to work with a murder indictment hanging over my head. If this same situation presents itself, if I hesitate and I'm killed, fuck it, I'm not here to worry about it. If I hesitate and my partner gets killed, I'm not going to go ring a doorbell and say, I fucked up, daddy's dead. So I'm not doing it, because it just weighs on you constantly. It's just that burden that's always in your mind. You just took a life, and now you did what you're paid to do, what you're supposed to do, what you're trained to do. I felt like a suspect for 53 weeks, and it wore on me. I mean, took its toll on my marriage. Going through a divorce. Took its toll on my kids. Like Kevin said, I think it was 7 minutes after the shooting. Lyndhurst is a small town. You got the grapevine there. They know that there was a shooting in town. So I picked up my cell phone and I called my wife. I said, listen, I've been involved in a shooting. I'm okay. I'm going to the hospital. Because you're always told that as a cop, when you're involved in a shooting, get out of the scene, go to the hospital. You take your blood temperature, your blood pressure, all that stuff. My wife decides she wants to come up to the scene. She grabs her sister who lives 2 doors down, her husband. I had like a family reunion at the crime scene. I'm telling them, just get out of here. I got to go to the hospital. Go to the hospital. I come back that night, and we have a command post. And the chief said to me, he goes, what do you want to do now? I said, Chief, you know what? I said, I really just want to go home. I said, I want to go see my kids. Because my kids were in the school district at that point. They're going to know there's a shooting, and they're going to know I was working. I said, I just want them to see me. So before I went to the hospital, I told my wife to go home. I said, listen, when the kids wake up, tell them. Tell them the whole story, because they're going to get,
They
bad.
don't want to hear it from their. They don't want to hear it from their friends.
They're going to get shit stories in school,
Yeah.
and then then they're going to people are going to say, oh, your father shot someone last time, So I said, go home and tell the kids. I'll get home before they go to school, and I'll never forget it. And this is what gets me the most. I walked in the house, and my wife and kids were sitting at the table eating breakfast before school. And my kids came running up to me and just gave me like the biggest hug. And I mean, I just felt them both just like melt in my arms. And that was one of the points I said, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I mean, what happens if I'm back to work and I'm working at midnight? Like Kevin said, I live right in the town. If I'm working at midnight and the kids hear sirens, what are they going to be thinking?